SpiderMan, created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, is a fictional superhero in the Marvel comic universe, but you knew that. Spider-Man is one of the most popular and commercially successful comic book characters of all time. He's a Marvel's flagship hero and even the company's mascot. He's been incorporated into all types of media, everything from comic books to newspaper strips, into TV shows and movies, and most importantly, to me, video games. And not only because it's the main discussion of this video, but because the game in question is one of my favorite all-time games. Now, let's talk Spidey video games. Starting back in 1982, Parker Brothers published a game for the Atari 2600 titled SpiderMan, where you climb skyscrapers and defuse bombs set by the Green Goblin. Since then, there's been about 30 Spider-Man games, and that's not even including all the games with Spider-Man in them, like Marvel Ultimate Alliance or Marvel vs. Capcom. That's legit just 30 games focused solely on Spider-Man. He's been on every console from the Apple II to the PlayStation 4. How, you might ask, can you choose a best out of so many games? Well, because a lot of them just suck a whole lot of rhino farts.
I'm the Rhino. Nothing can withstand me.
Just take Venom and Spider-Man's separation anxiety. Sounds like a dope game, right? It's got dope cover art. Boom, 4.75 out of 10. That's a steaming pile of carnage. What about Ultimate Spider-Man from 2005? The Ultimate series of comics are pretty cool. Nope, high of 78 out of 100 on Metacritic for the PlayStation 2 and a low of 62 out of 100 for the PC. It's incredibly hard to make a satisfying Spider-Man game to play. The source material is amazing, but it seems hard to translate that into a video game. They aren't all stinkers, so let's take a look at this year's release of Spider-Man on the PS4. It's got incredible reviews, the game is super impressive and immersive to just swing around the city all day and explore. And it's executed very well. But it's still not the best Spider-Man game. The best Spider-Man game of all time is Spider-Man from the year 2000. Spider-Man, made by Neversoft, was initially released as a PlayStation title. It was eventually ported out elsewhere, but the PlayStation is where Spidey was meant to be played. This game, in my opinion, is the best Spider-Man game ever made, even after taking my nostalgia shades off. This game erupted onto the scene after a superhero drought. The late 90s were really tough on Marvel and the company had to file for bankruptcy. They eventually turned it around by the year 2000 and started licensing its characters to movies and video games. They started out in movies with X-Men, starring an unknown actor at the time, Huge Jacked Man, and then in video games with Spider-Man for the PlayStation 1. Spider-Man was everything you need from a Spider-Man game. Neversoft used the amazing Tony Hawk game engine to power Peter Parker's prominent project piece of a Persian porcelain They used the Tony Hawk engine to power the game. So the game was on a good engine, check. This engine allowed the title to be the first 3D game appearance as Spidey, and you can't really have dynamic web slinging if you aren't in 3D, so check. This game featured professional voice acting from the same actors in the animated Spider-Man TV series at the time, such as Rino Romano, who's to Spider-Man like Mark Hamill is to Joker, so check. On top of the cast being well versed in the material and having a kick-ass script to go off of, the game was narrated by Stan fucking Lee himself. May the one above all rest his soul. Check. And it's not just cheesy, oh, it's Stan Lee type cameo either. It's legit wholesome narration that gets you excited to play the game. It reminds me of Saturday morning cartoons.
Welcome, true believers and newcomers alike. Spider-Man co-creator Stan Lee here. Once again, we find our hero Peter Parker, better known around the world as the amazing Spider-Man, in a heap of trouble. But this is just the beginning, Spidey fans. So get ready for a true superhero action thriller, packed to the brim with thrills and chills, twists and turns, more supervillains than you can shake a web at, and of course, non-stop web-slinging, wall-crawling action.
What else we got here? We got, this game has the best costumes. Check. The best level design. Check. And the amazing New Game Plus mode called Whatif, where it changes little details around while keeping the main story the same, like Ghost Rider cruising around on his motorcycle, or Submariner riding a whale in the distance, or a fish swimming around in Mysterio's head like a fishbowl. It was a great reason to replay the game and experience all these little Easter eggs and not focus on the story too much since you already beat it. Check. This game also perfected the balance of incorporating the Marvel Universe, but also keeping it a Spider-Man focused game, which is really impressive considering the amount of Marvel characters featured in this game. You have Spider-Man, of course. The main bad guys are Dr. Ock, Venom, Carnage, Scorpion, Rhino, and Mysterio, as well as a symbiote Dr. Ock abomination that was the source of fucking nightmares for little 8-year-old me. On top of the main villains, you have appearances from other Marvel folks like Daredevil, Black Cat, the Human Torch, the Punisher, Captain America, Mary Jane, J. Jonah Jameson, and subtle nods and Easter eggs from the likes of Ghost Rider, Submariner, and Green Goblin. Check. Also, the plot was really entertaining. Check. This game is 18 years old, so I'm gonna go ahead and assume spoilers don't matter and go ahead through the story extensively. The story of this game opens at a science expo where supposedly reformed Dr. Otto Octavius is demonstrating some science stuff where an imposter Spider-Man rushes the stage and steals his equipment. In the audience is Peter Parker and Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock is trying to get pictures of Spidey stealing Doc Ock's stuff to please his boss J. Jonah, but the imposter Spider-Man destroys his camera, causing Venom to come on play. Peter Parker, the real Spider-Man, in case you didn't know, is framed by the police and they put out a 5-star GTA wanted level on his ass and blow up a fuck ton of buildings trying to capture him because he stole some science equipment. Seems reasonable. Meanwhile, two mysterious figures release a gas into the city primarily to make the city easier to render and not allow free roam, so thanks Neversoft. From here, Spider-Man meets up with Black Cat and stops a robbery, only for Jameson to call him and say he's being attacked by a scorpion, and tells him to call the police, even though he's holding the phone, and probably should have just called the police himself, instead of calling Peter Parker, who to his knowledge is just a photographer, and a mediocre one at best. So, Spider-Man goes and defeats the Scorpion and Jameson says thank you by calling the police on him, and he just got rid of those stars too. Then Spidey meets up with Daredevil who's like, the fuck bro, why'd you rob Doc Ock? And Spidey's like, nah man, wrong dude, and Daredevil's like, okay, and then leaves. So, soon after another police helicopter shows up and causes a bunch of property damage chasing down Spider-Man. Spider-Man meets up with Black Cat again who has a bunch of news to piss in his Cheerios. Rhino is wrecking stuff at a power plant and Venom has kidnapped Mary Jane. Mary Jane, who is Spider-Man's wife in this game. Spider-Man being a good selfless hero says my wife can wait and let's go stop Rhino. So he does, and Black Cat gets injured and kidnapped by some phony paramedics. Cut to Spider-Man venting to the Human Torch while chilling on top of the Statue of Liberty. He doesn't know how to find Venom since he's immune to his spider sense, and in Venom fashion, he just appears out of nowhere to challenge Spider-Man to a web-slinging race that leads them into the sewers. In the sewers, you find Lizard, who says Venom locked him up there and took his little lizard babies. He tells you where Venom and Mary Jane are, and after rescuing Mary Jane, Spider-Man convinces Venom that he's been framed, and they work together to find who the imposter is. Venom and Spider-Man search the Daily Bugle for clues on who the imposter is when Venom smells Carnage and promptly leaves. Spider-Man all alone again fights through some symbiote slime and then finds the imposter, and it's revealed to be Mysterio. Mysterio tells Spider-Man that the symbiotes are being manufactured off Carnage's DNA and are being weaponized to take over the city. He sends him over to a warehouse where Carnage is being reproduced, and on the way Spider-Man runs into Punisher, who helps him find a way into the warehouse. Once there, Spider-Man rescues Black Cat, discovers her kidnappers are Octavius and Carnage, who are also the masterminds behind the whole plan. Dr. Octopus explains why he faked being reformed and explains his master plan when Venom busts in and the symbiotes start fighting like stray alley cats. This leaves Spider-Man to fight Octavius. Spider-Man wins, but Venom loses to Carnage. So now Spider-Man has to fight Carnage as well, who he also beats. And after this, the symbiote forms with Octavius and forms Monster Ock, a thing of nightmares that chases you out of the building while it explodes. Monster Ock is caught in the explosion, separating the symbiote from Dr. Ock. And then, out of nowhere, Captain America shows up in a jet because why not? And that's the end of the game. There's also an epilogue after this that shows the good guys sitting around playing Go Fish. Well, Black Cat and Human Torch are dancing. But then it cuts to the bad guys who are all in a jail cell, including one random henchman who gets fucking murdered. So why was he in the same cell as these monsters? That makes no sense. So yeah, that's Spider-Man for the PlayStation. Other than some janky controls, there's no real complaints here. I guess the gameplay can get a bit too easy at some points. Only a handful of the boss fights are actually difficult. I mean, the Rhino one you can beat with your eyes closed. The game is also pretty short. You can knock this out in a single playthrough in about 2 hours if you know where you're going. So definitely relying a bit on replayability, but when I put my nostalgia shades on, none of that superficial shit even matters. Spider-Man isn't even my favorite superhero. He's not even in my top 5. But this Spider-Man game did something to me as a kid, and it'll forever be engraved in my hippocampus as good feels. Thanks for watching. Excelsior.
Wait, so I can just don't hate you. And if you like this Everybody let me hear you say, oh yeah, yeah. Hold your hands in the air and wait for my just don't care. And if you like fishy grease and all the pimp shit, everybody let me hear you say, oh yeah.